Hey, fancy a threesome? No, not like that, you dirty bastards. I mean 3 books. We're here to tackle the Mr. Mercedes Bill Hodges trilogy. Here are 19 reasons to read this trio. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Dave Musson, at Dave Musson on Instagram, and this is the place where I'm taking you through the works of Stephen King in chronological order and giving you 19 reasons to read all of his books. And every so often I'll throw out some specials as well. Do have a look around my channel, there's plenty here, including my Stephen King starter kit. Oh, and if you like what you see, make sure you hit subscribe, because then you won't miss any videos in the future. So at this point in our timeline, we've reached 2014 and Mr. Mercedes, which was the first in a trilogy of books centered around the character Bill Hodges. Now, rather than try and stretch 3 videos out of this trilogy, I've decided to cluster them all into this one. So I'm going to give you 19 reasons to read this trilogy. Now, there might be some spoilers ahead, but I'm going to cluster them together at the end and give you warnings so you can dip out before they come in case you haven't read any of these yet and you don't want anything ruined for you. But other than that, let's tackle these 3 at once, shall we? Here are 19 reasons to read the Mr. Mercedes Bill Hodges trilogy. So here's your big takeaway from this. This trilogy is Stephen King living out his fantasy of being a crime writer. Across these stories, we get a grizzled, gnarly detective, a sick villain, an interesting cast of side characters, and a whole host of adventures that are loosely clustered together with one key event. We also get Holly Gibney. Yay! So the first book of the trilogy is Mr. Mercedes. Came out in 2014 and King said it was his first hard-boiled detective novel, even though he dabbled a little bit with that genre in some of his short stories. Now, it kind of goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you want to read this trilogy, don't skip the first one. There are some key events in the first one that you'll need to make sense of the other 2, and frankly, it's the best one, so you definitely don't want to miss it. So second up is 2015's Finders Keepers, a story that actually starts in the 70s and then fast forwards around here and there to multiple different timelines. It kind of sits on its own and definitely... So second up from 2015 is Finders Keepers, a story that actually starts in the 70s and then fast forwards to the Hodges timeline. It kind of sits on its own and kind of works on its own, but also very much feels like the middle one in the trilogy, which it is. The third from 2016 is End of Watch, which was originally going to be titled The Suicide Prince and feels like much more of a direct sequel to Mr. Mercedes. It also has some plot points that end up being quite important for the outsider and if it bleeds. So again, if you're planning to read those ones, you probably want to do End of Watch first. Which means you probably want to do Mr. Mercedes first. So what I'm saying is start here and then move forwards, okay? So onto the hooks for these then, starting with Mr. Mercedes, which kicks off with the most iconic scene of the entire trilogy and one of the most powerful things King has written. Basically, a bunch of unemployed people are queuing up outside a convention centre for a huge jobs fair, and some psycho in a stolen Mercedes turns up and ploughs through the line, killing a bunch of them and getting away with it. It's a case that haunts Bill Hodges into his retirement, particularly when the killer starts taunting him with letters, trying to urge him to commit suicide. Instead, Bill Hodges gets off his arse and tries to solve the case. Finders Keepers takes a different route. We start off with petty criminal Maurice Bellamy murdering author John Rothstein and taking money and unpublished novels from him. Now, he ends up going to jail, not for that crime, but for a drunken rape that he doesn't even remember doing. But before that happened, he'd managed to stash his stolen goodies out in some grounds behind his childhood home. Then we fast forward to 2010 and we meet young Pete Saubers, whose dad was injured in the original Mercedes incident and whose family are really struggling. He happens to find this stolen cash and these stolen books and starts feeding the cash back to his family while also reading the books and totally falling in love with them and then realising their value, so he tries to sell them on. Now, unfortunately for him, At the same time as this, old Maurice Bellamy has been released on parole, and he is trying to track down his stolen books that he's been waiting decades to read. The two come together and it's not particularly pretty. At the end of Watch, we see Hodges coming face to face again with Brady Heartsfield, the killer from the original book, who is not a spoiler to say because we learned that very early on. I just forgot to mention it 2 reasons ago. In End of Watch, we've got Hodges counting down against his own death. He's got terminal cancer and he is fucked, while Brady Heartsfield is trying to get people to commit suicide using a funky tablet device. Things keep building and building before coming together in one great big climax. So some of the best reasons for reading this trilogy have to be the characters. If you're going to stick with a bunch of characters for more than one book, you want them to be good. And the lead character, Bill Hodges, is great. A gruff, grizzled, old school detective. He is a walking book of cliches and yet is brilliant to spend time with. His actual name is also Kermit, which is fucking stupid and hilarious. Next up, Brady Heartsfield, the killer. A absolute fucking sick psychopath who is a tech nerd with a bloodlust and a sexual lust for his own mother. He is one sick puppy. We should also mention Jerome Robinson, a smart college kid who helps Hodges out and is eminently likeable. You will like him. Aside from the huge problem with Jerome is how King writes him to occasionally talk in really quite awful and racist, stereotypical slave language, which is just unnecessary and just no, don't do that. Why have you done that? Okay, so we have to mention Holly Gibney, the only character from this series who has her own Wikipedia page. She is frustrating as a character, but you can kind of see why King likes her, particularly as he said in his recent interview with the Losers Club podcast that he kind of sees her as what Carrie White would have turned into had she been able to grow up. That does make a lot of sense. Holly is this high-functioning, autistic, middle-aged woman who is kind of acting like a teenager all the time, mainly because she's been so repressed by her own mother. She's very awkward, but very brilliant at the same time. And she's probably best known for, instead of swearing, saying things like fracking and poopy. She is frustrating and she does come back a lot. We see her in this trilogy and we see her in The Outsider and we see her in If It Bleeds. And she's getting her own novel in 2023. The thing is with Holly, in Mr. Mercedes at least, she's a pretty good character. She's entirely bearable. Her transformation, her coming out of her shell with the help of Hodges, is really quite heartwarming to read. It's in books 2 and 3 that she really starts to get more and more annoying. But, as I said earlier, she has become a mainstay in the King world, so you do need to get to know her, and this is the place to start. Okay, we're coming up to spoiler territory here to round things off, so if you need to dip out, then do dip out. So while the opening carnage of Mr. Mercedes is undoubtedly the best bit of the entire series and the most gruesome bit of the entire series, second, a very close second, is the accidental death of Brady's mum. It is intense. Also, I really like the way in which King makes Brady able to carry on carrying out his evil and wicked deeds in End of Watch, despite supposedly being in a coma. It's very creative and it does bring an element of the supernatural in, which stops these books from simply being King trying to be Robert Ludlum all the time. So there are a few nods to other King works in these books, although these do kind of feel like they're in their own little world. However, there are your regulation amount of 19s, and there are some things that are hinted at in other books. We've got a phantom hand, which of course we see in Do McKee, and we've got a character using incontinence as punishment for service stuff, like we see in Dolores Claiborne. Brady is also in room 217 in his hospital, which I thought was a nice touch, and there's a mention of Sharp's cereals, for whom Vic Trenton was the advertising guru way back in Cujo. Nope, ain't nothing wrong here. Now, there is a part in End of Watch where King tries to describe a black neighbourhood in town that is so awful and so shockingly offensive that, frankly, it needs to be read to be believed. Finally, these 3 books are worth reading because, well, they're eminently readable. Despite their flaws, it's King getting his teeth stuck into some good storytelling. And as we know, he is the best when it comes to spinning a yarn. Across these 3 books we get some hugely memorable scenes, some great moments, and a decent cast of characters guiding us through, particularly with Hodges at the heart of it. You'll whiz through them, they're breezy reads, and yeah, they're definitely worth it. So there we go, 19 reasons to read the Mr. Mercedes, Bill Hodges, Holly Gibney trilogy. Let me know what you think of these 3 books in the comments, and let me know who your favourite character is. If you enjoyed that video, click around my channel, there's plenty more to explore, lots more 19 reasons to read, and lots more specials as well, including a complete guide to the Dark Tower. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any videos in the future, and if you want to come and talk Hodges, Holly, or anything else King related on Instagram, I'm at Dave Musson, always happy to hear from you. Thanks as ever for stopping by. I will see you again real soon.